Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, The Language of Leadership, Using Your Words to Lead in Your Career. My name is Dan Gardner, and I'm a member of the Alumni Career Programs team here in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is being sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered to our 335,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of online tools and social media communities. I know we have alumni joining us today from faraway places like Iceland, Australia, Spain, Germany, India, Nigeria, Sweden, Boulder, Colorado, Glastonbury, Connecticut, Gainesville, Florida, Montclair, New Jersey, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Wakefield, Waltham, Wellesley, Worcester, and many more. For each and every one of you out there, please know we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, just a couple brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Zoom online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of today's presentation, please contact Zoom support directly. You can reach them at 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website, found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A box, and you can find it by either hovering over the top or bottom of your screen and selecting Q&A. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Amber Nelson. Amber is the founder and president of Lingo Consulting. It's a marketing communications and research company dedicated to helping individuals and organizations learn and leverage their lingo. For more than 20 years, she's consulted on communication issues with clients, including Transamerica, Kaiser Permanente, General Mills, the American Heart Association, United Way, American Marketing Association, Boston University, and many more. In addition to her consulting, Amber delivers custom targeted communication training, workshops, and keynotes, along with online programs and a weekly blog that you can find. It's called The Lingoist. Her practical, pragmatic approach to effective communications is predicated on the idea that everyone can learn to be a better communicator, and that improved communication will create more civil discourse in our town squares, conference rooms, and homes. Amber, thank you so much for being here today. The floor is all yours.
And we are going to walk through a presentation here on the language of leadership. And give me just a sec here to get us going. There we go. We'll spend about 40 minutes or so going through this presentation. And as Dan said, you're welcome to throw questions into that Q&A box, and he will help get them to me. We're going to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions, so feel free to take notes as we go here. There definitely is room in this presentation for some workshopping on your part, and I encourage you to really be active as we go through this rather than just a passive participant. So the language of leadership. What we're going to do today is take a look at what the language of leadership really is. And you'll see as we go that it is going to be different for every single person who is on this webinar, and actually every single person has their own unique language of leadership. So we're going to look a little bit at that, and we're going to measure your leadership muscles. We've got some different metrics that we'll look at to help you assess your own leadership skills. Then we're going to look at your landscape. One of the things that often fails leaders who are looking to improve their language is they go out into the world and find some sort of pat answer. All leaders do X, or all leaders say Y. And if that doesn't mesh with your landscape, with the reality of the culture in which you're living, it becomes a no-win situation. Then we're going to look at defining a couple of goals and making an action plan. So that is a whole lot of work to get done in just about 40 minutes. So we will get started right away here. As a sort of an extended intro, I want to suggest to you that leadership and the things we're learning today, or the things I'm sharing with you today, are not just for special occasions. They are for everyday use. And you may see here that I have the little handshake there. So absolutely use your language of leadership for business. But when you are out in the world, being able to clearly say what you need in a way that others can hear you is indeed leadership. So order your coffee. Make sure your dog's doing what your dog needs to be doing. All of these things are ways that you're using your language to move forward in the ways that make the most sense for you, certainly at work, but also at home and in the greater world. The language of leadership is really about how to use your words to get things done. So there are just unlimited ways to look at this perspective, but one of my favorites is this quote from Warren Bennis: "The first responsibility of leadership is the creation of meaning," which essentially is saying that as a leader, it's your job to provide vision, to provide a pathway, to help others understand how to support you or how to follow you. And it's our words that help us do that. And there are, you can look at your word choice, you can look at your tonality, you can look at your ability to read a room. All of those things pour into having an effective style or an effective language of leadership for yourself. In order to start sussing out what your personal language of leadership is, I want to take a look at these different leadership styles. So you may be familiar with many of these. And we'll ask you in a few minutes here what you're most comfortable with in terms of a leadership style. So it's just what's most natural to you. An authoritarian leader is a leader who says, this is how it is, this is where we're going, and they don't necessarily look for a lot of collaboration. They're not looking for a lot of interactive experiences with those who follow them. If you think about an authoritarian leader in a really positive sense, think about first responders. First responders will say to you, the house is on fire, get out now. And they aren't really waiting to see if you agree that the house is on fire. They're not waiting to see if you'd like to leave by the door or by the window. They are extremely direct. They know what they want, and they expect their directions to be followed. That's an authoritarian language of leadership. A more collaborative or participative form of leadership is someone who is looking for your insights and who really is looking for a partnership in the way that they lead. If you think for a few minutes about folks in your own world, you probably can point out one or two collaborative or participative leaders. A delegative leader is a very interesting type in that they delegate responsibility. So sometimes that gets into a danger zone and that they do not take responsibility for what those that they've delegated to do. So they may say, I'm delegating part A to you, Tammy, and part B to you, Jim, and part C to you, David. But if they aren't really following through and understanding how each of those things are working together and truly bringing together each of those parts in a whole, a delegative leader can get into trouble. On the other hand, a delegative leader who is really able to parse out work or ideas or processes to others and bring them back together in a whole can be a phenomenal leader. A transformational leader is one that's really looking at the whole person that they are leading. So this may be an exceptional manager who really is looking at development and trying to figure out how to really transform the folks on their team to the next level. It's a much broader definition of leadership. A transactional leader is someone who will say to you something along the lines of, if you accomplish these 3 goals, we can get you a raise. If you accomplish these 5 goals, you can get a promotion. It's extremely quid pro quo in terms of being a transactional leader. A situational leader is one who really can come into a room or into an environment or into a work group and read what's going on and figure out what each person needs or what the group needs or what the project needs. So a situational leader may come in and be authoritarian within one group, be delegative within another group, and be totally transformational in another situation. So a situational reader really can read what the room needs or what the group needs. So take a minute there and think about where you might fit in, and it really is where you are most comfortable. It's not what you think is right. It's not how you want to be known. It's what's most comfortable for you. So take a minute here, and we're going to do this little poll. So take a minute and check whichever box works for you or makes the most sense for you.
Have to pick one.
Yes.
But do you often see overlap between these styles? Do people kind of fluctuate in and out, maybe grow and change over time?
Absolutely. And the reason we have them choose just one is we want to see what are you most comfortable with right now. So when you become really adept at leadership, you are able to toggle back and forth. You can walk into a room and say, oh, these people are out of control. They need some authoritarian leadership. Oh, I need to give my team some more responsibility. I'm going to shift into delegative leadership. So the idea is that you get as conversant as you possibly can be to toggle back and forth. So it's a little bit like thinking about learning a foreign language, that if you were to speak French, you might learn a word or two, and that's what you're really good at. But as you get better, you know where you should be using your French language versus your English language if you are, depending on the circumstances in which you find yourself.
Great. And it looks like we've got a lot of results coming in. Just about 80% of folks have completed the poll. I believe, can you see the results?
I can. This is really interesting to me. So we have 52% of people are saying they're collaborative or participative, which is a wonderful place to be and really helps me figure out where we go from here in terms of this discussion. About 6% say they're authoritarian. Another 6% says delegative. About 7% says they're transformational. Situational is more than a quarter at 27%. And we have some outliers who say they're transactional. We've got 2% who say they're transactional. So I'm going to take just a moment here on those results and say again, none of these are wrong. None of them are perfect. And it really is about how you use your leadership style to make things happen in your own world, whether that's at work or at home or, when you're working on the new addition to your house with the contractor. It really is about how you use these. Each of them can be very, very effective if you know how to leverage them appropriately. So great. All right. So one of the things that I want you all to think about next is role models. So when you think about your language of leadership, you've identified for yourself where you are in terms of what leadership style is most comfortable to you right now. So the next step I recommend most often is to look around your world for role models. Who does what you want to do really, really well? Now, there are children will often look at like sports stars or celebrities as their role models. I want you to think about role models in terms of communication and leadership. So you can look for role models in a couple of different places. You can look in real life. So in your work world, maybe you have a manager, maybe the president of your company, or somebody in your work world really does an exceptional job of leading in a way that makes sense to you, that you would like to emulate. You can look at your social circle. Maybe you have a peer. Maybe you have somebody that you see at that professional organization meeting once a month. But look around your social circle and see who leads really well and uses their words in a way that makes sense to you and feel really comfortable to you. Look at your family. Sometimes parents or aunts or uncles or siblings do a really great job of leadership. Are the very best ones. Look at literature, look at television and movies. You can see I've listed some particular samples for someone like myself. You can see Malala there. She has done an amazing job of embodying her own language and her own leadership style to change minds and make huge strides in terms of social awareness and education for girls around the world. Of course, we all know Oprah, and one of the ways that Oprah has been so successful is, again, to be really authentically herself. You can see on the bottom left there is Eleanor Roosevelt. She was phenomenal in her time and day for reaching out with the tools that she had at hand. So you may or may not know that she had a weekly newspaper column for a time. She traveled around and met people face to face, but she really knew what she believed. She had a strong point of view, and she was really able to connect with many of the people in the world that could hear her message in a way that transformed her into a true leader. Sheryl Sandberg, you may know her from Facebook or from Lean In. She has a very particular style that is nothing like Malala's style, that is nothing like Oprah's style. Very unique to her personally. And you see in the middle, I have Madam Secretary. I don't know how many of you watch Madam Secretary, but I think if you take a look at what they have created in terms of a character here, she has an exceptional ability to use her words to lead. Doesn't always find the need to be the smartest person in the room. She really is careful about when she upstages somebody. She uses humor beautifully. And she's always composed and sort of understands her place in whatever the situation may be. And she's super good about getting ideas from her staff. So those of you who said you were collaborative or participative leaders, I think she's a great example of that. So take a few minutes and think through the folks in your life that you could use as role models. So what you're looking for is folks who emulate the leadership style you are most comfortable with, then they do it really well. The next thing we're going to do here is a communications audit. So I have this slide here to sort of give you an example of what happens in my world with corporate clients, and we're going to apply that to your personal leadership skills. So in my professional world, I am often called upon to work with corporate clients to do something called a communications audit. And essentially what it is we look at every single way they're communicating with every single one of their audiences, and we make sure that they are strong and consistent in each one of those areas. So it's an assessment of how they're communicating. And we're going to do that same thing today for you. But your personal communications audit, I'm going to ask you to just get out a notepad or pen and paper and just rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 means you need a lot of work in this area and you know it's a place that you could brush up a little bit. And 10 means you're an expert in this area. You have no problem whatsoever managing these things. So the first one we're going to look at is apologies. So I know that this has gotten a lot of airtime in the last couple of years. Or noted for over-apologizing. So over-apologizing happens when you apologize for things that you really shouldn't be sorry for. So I can give you some examples here. If you need to ask a question of somebody and you give them a call and the first thing you say is, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to know about," you've just apologized already and given away a lot of your power. A lot of people use apologies as a placeholder or as a warm-up. So instead of saying, "Hi, Sarah, how are things with you today?" they'll say, "Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you, but," and you've already demoted yourself in that whole conversation. And I'm not talking about necessarily giving away your power in a way that you're trying to one-up somebody, but just occupying your own space. Don't give away your own space. So apologies are the first place to take a look at. And I have often recommended to people, and you might just do a mental tally for yourself here. Think about yesterday or think about this morning so far. How many times have you apologized? How many times have you said, "I'm sorry"? And for what reasons? If you said, "I'm sorry to bother you," if you said, I'm sorry when you scoot past somebody in an office space, you can say, "Excuse me." Excuse me works just as well as "I'm sorry." But think a lot about how you're using sorry and count the numbers of times that you've said, "I'm sorry." Let's just say today, give yourself a count. Awareness is one of the first steps to making these things better. Secondly, oversharing. This is an interesting thing that happens with folks who want to explain what's happened or why we're making this decision or why we're going to this place or doing that thing. Often I would suggest that you think about what do people need to know. So in terms of oversharing, if we've decided that, just going to use an example, our holiday party this year is going to be on December 15th at 6 o'clock at this restaurant. So I can tell you all of those things and you can accept that. And if you have questions, you can ask me. Oversharing would be if I said to everybody, our holiday party is going to be on the 15th. We really wanted it on the 13th, but so-and-so wouldn't agree to it. And we wanted it at this other restaurant, but this other restaurant wouldn't seat us and they wanted to charge too much money. So now we're going to have to go to this other restaurant. And that's what we're going to have to do. So you can see the oversharing diluted my message, really didn't help anybody feel good about where we're having our holiday party. But if somebody had heard something different or wanted more information, they'll ask for it. So I'm not at all suggesting that you lie or fudge the truth. What I'm saying is really consider the value of what you're sharing with the folks in your environment or the folks that you're trying to lead. How well are you at building rapport? On a scale of 1 to 10, how quickly can you get to a comfort level with folks that you are to be leading or in your work group? Building rapport is an incredibly important skill. You may have heard that people do business with people they like. It's true whether you're within a corporate environment or you're a vendor. So I'm, again, not suggesting that you're fake. I'm not suggesting that you flatter unnecessarily, but think a lot about how well you do at building rapport and rate yourself 1 to 10. Saying thank you is, in my opinion, incredibly undervalued. We don't do it nearly enough. And it's really different when somebody says, here's this project or here's this deliverable we have for you. And you say, great. That's really different than saying, thank you comes in many different varieties. You can say, thank you for getting me a cup of coffee. You can say, thank you for having your team work all night on that report. You can do it one-on-one, like on a phone call or in an email. A really great way to say thank you kind of leads into our next place about giving credit, but to be public about your thank yous. So when it's possible on, say, an email chain or in a meeting to point out the really great work that someone did, a really great contribution that they made, that's an amazing way for you to show leadership by calling others out for their great contributions. So take a minute there on this next one and rate yourself. How good are you at giving credit to where credit is due? So I talked a little bit about giving credit to others. Another thing that a person who really has mastered their language of leadership will do is they will take credit themselves. And I refer to this as putting your name on your work. So it's not that you run into a room and say, I'm the most amazing, fantastic person ever. But when somebody says, hey, great report, you say, yes, thank you very much. We worked hard on it and we're really pleased with the way it came out. Give yourself credit. Put your name on your paper. Reading a room. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the idea of emotional intelligence. That's where this comes into play, is reading a room. When you walk in, how able are you to figure out where folks are? How able are you to meet them where they are? One of the most effective tools you will ever have as a leader is being able to see where folks are and how you can meet them where they are, using your words, using your manner, using your tone of voice. So rate yourself on that. How great are you at reading a room? This next one is the next two, actually. We get into a little bit of parsing words. So as a verb, if I think something is right, that's different than I feel it is right. I can say, I think we need to cut back on our expenses next quarter because X, Y, and Z. That's a very different meaning than, I feel like we should cut back on expenses next quarter. So I'm not suggesting that you never ever use feel. I know that there are a lot of places where that's appropriate, but I ask you to use feel and think with intention. There's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of years suggesting that people use I feel statements. So instead of saying you were rude, we say something, we're coached to say something like, I feel like you were rude, or I felt slighted by the way you treated me, or I felt slighted by that comment. So we've got a lot of training now with the I feels, and we need to really be intentional about when we use I think versus I feel. So rate yourself there. How well do you do at intentionally using think versus feel? On a similar note, the know versus believe. So you can say, I know that we need to reduce our overhead because of this, this, and this. And you're talking about a fact. When you say, I believe we need to reduce overhead because of this, this, and this, you have opened yourself up to a whole lot of conversation that you may not want to be having. Believing something is not nearly as fact-based as knowing something. So take a look again at the words that you use on a regular basis and rate yourself. Do you use know when you know something to be true, or do you try to soften it by saying, I believe? Again, a time and a place for I believe, but rate yourself on how well you use those words with intention. The next one here is accentuating the positive. Leaders often have to deliver really hard news. It is not always fun to be a leader. Sometimes you have to choose the best of really bad options. But in the course of doing that, you have the opportunity to accentuate the positive. So I've worked with a number of clients who have had to downsize. And accentuating the positive doesn't mean, hey, look at our company, we're going to survive because we laid off 310 people. It is more along the lines of, you 310 people have been amazing, and here's what you gave to us. Here's what we're going to give back to you. And to really help them see their value, even if you can't keep them, even if you can't maintain their employment with you. You can accentuate the positive by walking into a room and saying, hey, you guys did a great job on solving problem 1 and 2. We still need to hit problem 3 and 4, so let's get to that now. We often, as leaders, feel like it's our job to point out the things that we need to fix. It's a little bit like, I don't know how many of you are parents, but if you are parents, it's a little bit like parenting, that you want to say to your kid, tie your shoes, tuck in your shirt, chew with your mouth closed. And while all of those things are really important, it is also important to say, hey, you did good on that thing. You did well on that thing. So accentuating the positive can go a long way to delivering bad news, to boosting morale, and to being someone that other folks want to be around. So rate yourself on accentuating the positive. And then the last one here that I'd like you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 is, how well do you use your words to increase your worth? What I mean by that is, how often do you say, oh, I just work in banking, versus I run a department that helps make online banking secure for customers all over the world. The first one is diminishing your worth. The second one increases your worth. We actually offer a whole class on this, and there are a million ways to use your words to increase your worth. The example I just gave, but then also I would say strip out of your vocabulary minimizing words like just. I'm just a bank teller. I am just a manager at a university. Strip just out. Strip out only. There are a whole lot of minimizing words that we use on a regular basis that serve absolutely no purpose and certainly don't set us up as leaders. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and finish rating yourself on each of these, and hold on to this because we're going to look at this a little bit later on toward the end of our talk here together. You've done a little bit of assessment in terms of what your communication skills are. Let's take a look at your landscape. So everyone has a different landscape depending on what your job is, but it goes beyond your job to the people in your work group, to your direct reports, to the people you report directly to. Culture cannot possibly be overstated in terms of, or overemphasized in terms of figuring out your own language of leadership. You can be a phenomenal leader in company A because it's a good cultural fit for you. You can go to company B with all of those same phenomenal skills and you can bomb, and it's just not having a good alignment between your culture, between the culture in which you're working and your own skills and style. So there are three things I encourage folks to look at with their culture: the values, the lexicon, and the heroes. So first, the values. What does your company say they believe in? So do they say, if you look at your company website, these are always very interesting exercises to me. If you look at your company website, chances are there's going to be something that's about us or our values or our mission or our vision. And it's worthwhile to go take a look at that and see what they say their values are. And then to start looking around at what they actually do. So there's the stated values. Then you can look at the lexicon. What kind of language do they use? Are they talking about who's going to hustle, who's going to be entrepreneurial, who's a go-getter, who's aggressive? Or do they say who's collaborative, who's a great manager, who really nurtures the next generation, who brings people together? So when you start listening and looking at the lexicon, you're learning so much about what's truly valued in a culture. A couple of the places I would suggest that you look for those, again, go to the website. It's often written by an outside person or by somebody whose job it is to make the company look great. So the lexicon isn't going to be necessarily the unvarnished truth that you find on a company website, but it's a good place to start. If you have access to job postings from your company, that's a really interesting place to start as well, because you can see how the company is presenting themselves to the rest of the world. Then start digging through if you have a company newsletter or a company website or a SharePoint site where people are able to share information back and forth, and see what kind of language is used in a positive light. So they may feel like folks who leave at 5 o'clock every day are slackers. Or they may think people who leave at 5 o'clock every day have great work-life balance and are working hard during the day, and they support them going home every day at 5. Start looking at those and you can get a really good feel for your culture. And then the last one here is the heroes. So look at the people who are celebrated in your company. It may or may not be your president. It may or may not be your manager. It may or may not be the person who started the food drive for the food unstable in your community. It may be somebody who has won an award, or it may not. Maybe nobody in your company cares about that award that was given out by a professional organization. But take a look around your company to see what do they say they value? What do they really value? What kind of words do they use to describe successful look through all of that. And if you do this right, it's pretty deep work, and it can take you a couple of weeks to really suss through all of this information. But once you've done that, what you need to do is check in with yourself. Did what you learn inspire you? Are you thinking, yes, I cannot wait to really be seen as a leader in this organization. I know that I can lead here. Does it make you feel aspirational? I think I can do this. I want to try to do this. I want to be more like what they want. Or does it fill you with frustration? I am never going to be that person. I don't want to be that person. I'm not interested in achieving a level of leadership or being a hero in the way those people were leaders. You really need to check in with yourself and see where that alignment is. So I think we have another poll here to just check in with you. There we go. Check in with you and see how much alignment do you see between your company's cultural landscape and your communication skills and leadership style.
And while we're gathering responses here on this poll question, I just wanted to remind folks that you can certainly type in your additional questions, things that you're curious about, things that you're looking for clarity on using that Q&A box. You can hover over either the top or bottom of your screen, select Q&A, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. But it looks like we do have a lot of folks participating in the poll, so I'll go ahead and share those results so you can see what people said.
Excellent. Okay, so we have mostly comes in at 46%, which is lovely, lovely news, because it's really frustrating to be working at a place when you realize, this is never going to work for me. So we've got 46% say mostly, 28% say somewhat, 21% say yes, absolutely. So that's almost, what is that? That's a fifth of everybody that has responded. And that's pretty good that you really see a clean, clear match there. Only 6% of you say not at all. So for those 6% of you who say not at all, I strongly recommend that you take a little time and think that through. Is this a place that you want to stay? Is it time to start shopping? If they don't mesh and this is a place you want to stay, you can learn to work within an environment that does not completely align with you. You can learn to be a leader there. These are all absolutely skills that you can get better at. So you can be a really great authoritarian leader if it doesn't come naturally to you. It's practice. It's just building a muscle like any of these other skills are. But for those of you who say not at all, I encourage you to have some deep talks with yourselves and figure out what's going to be best for you in terms of paving your way forward. So that's great. Thank you. All right. So what I've put together here as a formula is that your language of leadership essentially is your skills and style, so what you naturally have or what you currently have, your role models, which are where you're going to aspire to, or ideas of how you might improve what you already do, and then the reality of culture. And those three things together really become your language of leadership. Kind of leadership style do you have? Your skills, we did those 10 different items that you rated yourself 1 to 10 on. Think about your role models and think about the culture and how well that culture fit is. And once you can source all of those things out and get them really in alignment like this, you will have your own personal language of leadership. And what we do with that language of leadership is we create an action plan. And what we're going to do for today is look at that action plan and just take one communication goal as the first iteration of your action plan. So this is an iterative process. So the first thing you'll do is choose one communication goal. You'll see the second bullet point here says name one objective. So I want to take just a minute here and talk through or define my terms for you. So in my world, a communication goal is something that's long-term. It's creating change and it's building a legacy for you and your own leadership. So a couple of examples that I can give you from folks I've worked with in the past. One person that I worked with was really frustrated that he didn't feel like the president for whom he worked, and he was the communications, the executive communications manager. So it was his job to deliver the messages from the president. And he felt like the president didn't respect him. He felt like the president didn't hear him and didn't really care so much about him. So for him, a big communication goal was to develop a rapport with the president of the company that was reciprocal and worked well for both of them. So you can see that's long-term, it's creating change, and it's building a legacy for him. Another communication goal is there's a woman that I worked with who really wanted to get promotion to the next level. So she knew that her communication goal was to really show up in the way that a leader would show up for that next job that she wanted. Again, that's long-term, it's creating change, and it was building a legacy for her. The objectives are each of the steps that you take toward completing that goal. They're short-term, they're tactical, and they're moving toward goals. So in the example of the executive communications manager that I mentioned, we broke down his work into a couple of different objectives. The first thing was for him to listen to what was said, not what he was reading into a particular interaction. So he would go into the office with the president and do what he needed to do. And the president might take a call while he was there. He might look at his cell phone. He might make this communication manager wait while he stepped out of the room to do something. He had a lot of, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. He wasn't super engaged. So in terms of objectives, one of the first steps that our client took was to just hear what was being said and to hear what wasn't being said. So at no point did the president say, you're doing a horrible job. In his most recent employee review, he wasn't told that he was doing a horrible job. So a lot of this was just what was in his head. So his first objective was just to hear what was being said and what wasn't being said. So to right-size the conversations that were happening. A second objective goal for him was to ask for feedback. and to take it at face value. Again, listen to what the president was saying and don't read anything else into it. And then the third step that he took as an objective first two objectives were really about him listening and getting information. And the third objective he started to move forward with. So that's what you'll do for your personal action plan. If you take a moment and think about where you are and think about where you'd like to be, whether it is feeling more respected by someone or getting a promotion or really taking on more leadership for whatever your particular current role is, think about one goal that is going to get you closer to that. And then chart out 1 or 2 or 3 objectives that you can complete toward reaching that goal. One of the really important things about the objectives is that they have to be short term. You have to be able to say, I will have this done on Tuesday or next Friday. You don't want it to be super ongoing because you will never be able to get the data you need and move forward. So we want to make sure those are short term, they're measurable. You've probably heard of SMART goals. I use that approach for these kinds of objectives. And you want to make sure that they're moving you toward your goal. So take a moment here and think about one communication goal that you have currently and just one step you can take toward reaching that goal. And once you have those ideas in mind, what you're going to do is work to make it a reality. And what I mean by that is set appointments. So I'm going to go back to this gentleman who was the executive communications manager for president of this insurance company. He needed to make an appointment with himself. He needed to say, when I go in to talk to the president next Tuesday, I'm going to do these 3 things. I'm going to listen to what he says. I'm going to ask for feedback. And afterward, I'm going to schedule out in my calendar, literally in my calendar, 15 minutes for myself to process what I heard and to make sure that I understand where things are. That's him making an appointment with himself to achieve his first objective toward his goal. The second thing you're going to need to do is really invest in observations. Often in our current work world, and certainly as leaders, we spend a whole lot of time doing and a whole lot of time moving and hustling and getting the next thing done and checking the thing off the list and scheduling the meeting. But we don't always take the time to observe. So I would recommend that in order to make your personal language of leadership work for you as a personal action plan, you spend time observing. And it could be observing how people respond to new things that you're trying. It could be observing how other leaders in your organization get their needs met. It could be seeing what it looks like for someone to demonstrate respect for someone else. So in the case of this executive communications manager, the president for whom he worked didn't really show what we might consider respect for anybody in the organization. So for him, it wasn't personal that the president didn't go out of his way to say, hey, great job, because the president didn't do that for anybody. And through observation, he learned that. Try exploration. And when I say exploration, I mean exploration. So think about all of the different kinds of fields that may not be your field. If you work in healthcare and you're trying to figure out how to become a leader in the nursing staff, look at and really open. Look at TED Talks. Read some of those blogs that you're subscribed to. Talk with your friends, but really explore and figure out how you might be able to apply maybe an out-of-the-box idea to your current situation. And there is absolutely always education. So when you look back at those skills that we talked about, those skills that you rated yourselves on 1 to 10, you can absolutely get educated on every single one of those skills. If there is something within your work group or your organization that you need to be better at, you can go to Coursera, you can go to Lynda, you can use us. We do lots of training. But there are so many places for you to develop the skills that you need. I just saw a recent study, and I can't remember who it was by, but they said 83% of employees want to be developed, and that something like 23% of organizations actually offer it or are active about it. So if you want education, go to your manager, go to your human resources director, ask them for it. chances are there's some way they can help you pay for it or give you time off or allow for you to get the education that you need to get better at your job and to get better at being a leader. Don't be afraid to ask for a leadership course, for them to foot the bill for a leadership course. Don't be afraid to spend a weekend doing a leadership retreat. Really make sure that you are getting what you need. It's your job to take care of yourself, and that is one of the best ways you can do it, is to stay informed and to get continuing education. So the personal action plan is, as I said earlier, it's iterative. So you're going to have a goal, you're going to accomplish the objective, and you're going to find another objective that helps you reach that goal. And once you reach a goal, make up another goal, find another goal, reach for the next thing. Communication, a great communicator is always getting better. They are always learning. The landscape changes so rapidly. If you think about how we communicate with one another now, it's often text messages. Maybe your work group uses Yammer, or maybe you have some other messaging app that you use within your work group. 10 years ago, that wasn't even a thing. I think 10 years ago, it was all email, and you had to deal with the email forwarders and threads, and some people still do that. But this changes all the time, and there is no reason for any of us to fall behind. And a lot of that comes from getting really entrenched in the thing you're doing right now. But we believe at our company that great communication makes everything easier. And I think that is true in terms of finding your language of leadership and really finding your pathway forward. So this is a process that never ever stops. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So I think we are now at a place where if we have some questions, Dan, I'd be happy to dig into anything folks want to know a little more about.
Absolutely. And again, just a reminder, please feel free to submit your questions using that Q&A box. We've got a couple here that we can get started with. Lauren's asking, Amber, what type of sources, blogs, websites, etc., do you reference to keep current on language and communication trends? I know you mentioned TED Talks. Are there any blogs you follow or folks in this communication field that you feel
There's a group called the Communication Network, and they do beautiful, beautiful work. And you can, I think for free, you can just go check out their webinars. So if you're in a nonprofit environment, the Communication Network is fantastic. If you are in a more professional environment, or not more professional, a corporate environment, rather, take a look at the International Association of Business Communicators. They do, again, great webinars, great work. And then sort of, I always look at, so I'm a big fan of Twitter. I like the rapidity of it. I like that it's fast. I like that I can search for things quickly. Inc. magazine, Forbes magazine. If you go just do like hashtag words matter, hashtag communications, you can find great stuff from them. And then I have a couple of folks who aren't necessarily specific to communication, but they are more specific to how you move through the world. And I think knowing yourself and knowing what works for you helps you to be a better leader. You're not trying to fill someone else's shoes. You're really comfortable with who you are and how you show up. So for entrepreneurs, I would recommend Marie Forleo. She has some great stuff. And then Seth Godin is always amazing. S-E-T-H, his last name is G-O-D-I-N. Ostensibly, he's talking about marketing, but really he's talking about communication all the time. He has a daily blog that is phenomenal, and he has a number of books that are phenomenal. And the last one that I'll reference is there's a woman named Bernadette Jiwa, J-I-W-A is her last name. And she has a blog and she's on Twitter and she does great work in this space. Her company is called The Story of Telling. So what she does, and there are a lot of great resources on her website, but what she does is she helps folks understand how to tell their own story, whether it's about a company or who they are. And she is incredibly relatable and has super pragmatic, wonderful tools. And it's nice to get a little, like from a Seth Godin or Bernadette Jiwa, it's great to get in your inbox a little zingy reminder of, oh, that's right, I should be doing this, or I didn't think about that. So I highly encourage subscriptions to those folks' blogs and to really be aware of it. Observation is a great way. In the next meeting you go to, Lauren, take a look around. See who's really doing what they're doing well and see who's getting ignored, see who's getting talked over, and pay some attention to how people respond to you. And that is really one of your best resources.
That's great. And I'm so glad you mentioned entrepreneurs. That was one of the questions that I actually had. When you were looking at the audit and, you were talking about looking at a company website or a mission statement, a vision. Can you talk a little bit about how an entrepreneur might strive for that alignment? One might think that, they would be perfectly aligned because it's their business, it's their company. But what are the ways do you recommend that entrepreneurs have a mission, a vision, things of that nature?
So one of the things that's so I'm an entrepreneur. I've run my own business for more than 20 years. So I have a little bit of information on this one. Often what happens for entrepreneurs is that they choose to do something because they love it, that they have a passion and they're pursuing the passion. And the complicated. And if you think about it like a garden, it needs to be consistently and constantly pruned. It needs to be nurtured. You've got to fertilize it. You got to, pull out the weeds. And that can be difficult for an entrepreneur to do. So sometimes what happens is we find that we have this great love of, well, I'm just going to pull an example out of the personal training. Let's say I'm a personal trainer. And so I'm looking for clients and I'm doing all of this work. And what the world tells me is I'm supposed to have webinars and I'm supposed to market this way and I'm supposed to do this thing. And it's a dime a dozen for the how to be a successful entrepreneur stuff. And what you need to do is take what works for you in those things. You can't pick them up and make them yours if they don't really fit you. So listening to what you really want, I highly recommend for entrepreneurs that at least twice a year, you block out time for yourself to say, where am I? Where do we want to go? How did we get here? Because so often as an entrepreneur, you have opportunities that you want to pursue. So you might have the best plans in the world, but an opportunity comes along. So instead of going straight from point A to point B, you went from point A to point B to point C to point D, and you really need to be on top of that. So I recommend at least twice a year sorting that out. The point in sorting that out is for you to determine for yourself what your culture is. It's hard. It's a big, heavy lift for a single person or a couple of people who are working together to determine culture. One of the most successful groups I've seen do this, they have a big data company, and it started with just, as so many of these things do, with one guy in his home office. And he now has, 78 employees. They work internationally. It's big data. He's been incredibly successful. But for him, and we just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, for him, he hired with great intention. He was looking for people who were curious. He was looking for people who would do more than just the work in front of him. And that has served him well in terms of the way he leads and in terms of the way he's built a culture. He made culture building really important from the get-go. And so for an entrepreneur, it's being mindful of it. It's being intentional. And it's understanding that you're going to have some organic growth and you're going to have to go prune your garden. So make time for that and be intentional about it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. We have another question here from Nina. Do you have more examples of words that people, she says, or women in parentheses, words that people may use to sabotage their leadership? I know I certainly fall in the category of a millennial man over apologizing. The just that you talked about, that certainly resonated with me. Do you have any other examples that you can share off the top of your head?
Sure. So we have, they call it filler language. So the like, the the just, all of those things are fillers. One of the things that's really interesting to do is to write an email. The next email you write, before you send it, look at it and think, where do I have extra words here I don't really need? Does your email say, hi, Steve, I'm just writing to check in on how you might be getting along with that project you said you'd have to me yesterday? Boy, that is incredibly vague. I've taken all sorts of responsibility for things that aren't mine. I'm not really just writing. I am writing to check. I'm only, and we do a lot of So there's the filler words, and we do a lot of, it's self-soothing in a lot of ways. It feels good to say, I'm sorry, because I know that I can now move on to the next thing. It feels good to say, I'm only this or that, because I've taken the spotlight off myself. And part of stepping into this language of leadership and your role as a leader is to really stand up straight. So really own that space that you have. So if you need for someone to get you a report, you can be really friendly about it and say, hey, I'm checking in on this report. I promised it to the person further up the food chain today at noon. Thought I'd have it from you yesterday. When can I expect it? There's nothing mean about that. There's nothing aggressive about that. But I didn't apologize. I didn't say I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't say I'm just writing about this thing. So there are lots and lots of words that we use. And I would say the first place to look is your emails, because you can look at them. It's hard to hear yourself sometimes, but look at your emails. And as you start to observe other people around you, you'll see what they do and you'll be able to recognize it better in yourself. And you can just skip those words. Let me throw out for the I'm sorry people. I'm going to throw out one thing here. There are lots of replacements you can do. So if you walk into a meeting room and everybody's there, you could say, I'm sorry, and sit down. I mean, it could be noon and your meeting starts at noon and you could say, I'm sorry, because clearly everyone else is there. Or you could walk in and you could say, hi, everybody, great to see you. Or you could say, thanks for waiting. There are all sorts of ways to get around the I'm sorry in a way that feels self-soothing, because we feel like we need to say something when we come in. So thank you is a great one.
Great. Well, I will certainly work on that. I know I've taken a lot of that to heart, so I appreciate your tips. I know you have a couple additional slides, and we are coming up on the top of the hour, if you can believe it. So if you wanted to run through the last few slides, and then, yeah, we'll move forward from there.
Great. Okay, so I have just 3 more tips that are important for all of us to take to heart. And again, I'm talking about whether you're at work or whether you're at home or whether you're in the grocery store. Listen to yourself. So I'm not talking about the sort of Jiminy Cricket, I need to listen to my conscience sort of thing. Literally listen to the words that you're saying. It can be fascinating when you catch yourself saying, how stupid could he be? Or that's ridiculous. Or when you start to really listen to the way you talk, it helps you develop your awareness, and it helps you create change. Listen to others. So I've said that a couple of times, but you cannot possibly do enough listening to others. So it may be people you admire, it may be people you know, it may be celebrities, but listen to how they express themselves, and that will help you to express yourself better and to lead better. And then challenge yourself. So for example, the question about what words maybe we should get rid of, don't ever stop asking yourself those questions. Figure out how to continually make yourself better. Figure out how to be comfortable with that spotlight of saying, here's what I know. I know that we need to reduce over. And I wanted to let everybody know that this was a real good overview of the language of leadership, and you absolutely can use this to get further on your pathway to being the leader that you want to be. But we also offer a 6-week interactive online course. Our next session starts on January 8th. It's a weekly 90-minute class, actually pretty similar to this. We do it on Zoom and we hand out recordings the next day. But it's a weekly 90-minute class with recordings. We provide handouts so you actually can go through the workshopping of your skills and your leadership style and your culture, your environment. And we have a lot of personal support that comes along with that. We keep our groups really small so that I can talk one-on-one with folks and we can workshop whatever the issues are for individuals. So we normally do that for $497, but for BU alumni, we're gonna do $397. And all you need to do in order to get in on that, and even if you just want to let me know that you're interested, we will send out the link to sign up when we have that ready in a couple of weeks. And I think you're going to get a sheet tomorrow. We'll send out more information for you. But if you're interested in looking at that now, all you need to do is send a note to that email address here, info@lingoconsultinginc.com. And in the subject line, just write language of leadership and just put a note in there saying I'm writing from BU and I want to be on the list. And then we will make sure that you get the link to sign up in the next couple of weeks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amber. I really appreciated your presentation today. I know I learned a great deal, and I'm sure everyone else on the webinar did as well. So thank you for your time and for the generous offer, the discount for BU alumni. We're always grateful for our multi-time webinar presenters, the folks who keep coming back, and the popularity, the number of people that we had come out for this webinar. You know, it really shows that your expertise is in demand. So thank you for sharing it with the Alumni Association.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to leave you all with a little note to remember that your words matter. Use them wisely.
Great. And I also want to thank everyone who joined us today. Especially I want to thank those who have donated to BU in the past. Just a note, we do have another excellent webinar coming up tomorrow, and we have space available. That one's called Career Happiness. Does it really exist? So I encourage all of you to visit our website at bu.edu/alumni/events, and you can sign up for those sessions and see all the opportunities that we have coming up for BU alumni. As always, if you or any other alums that you know would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar, or if you have a topic that you'd like to showcase for the Alumni Association, please reach out to me at the Alumni Relations Office, or you can reach me by email. It's dangard, DANGARD, @bu.edu. Thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great day or a great evening wherever you might be. Thanks again, Amber.
Thank you. Bye-bye.